Hello and welcome back to the F2 show. I'm your host Fraser Ford, and joining me to look ahead to this weekend, we have British GT driver Mo Ritzen, Formula One Feeder Series podcast host Jim Kimberley, and Inside F2's very own Lawrence Griffin. Coming up on the show then, we review the season so far after an enthralling opening 4 rounds of the season. Formula 2 returns to Barcelona for the first time since 2020, but is it a hit or is it a miss? We get the verdict from our panel, and we answer your questions ahead of this weekend. All right, Mo, great to have you with us. We caught up with you last at the Motormouth charity karting event back in March, didn't we? How's life been since then, and how's the start of your season going?
Yeah, it's been busy. It's been very busy. I think the Motormouth karting event was almost like a kind of a kickstart into the season. But I think when we met there, I didn't know I was actually doing British GT yet, so it's all been quite last minute. But no, it's going well. I think we're the balance of performance isn't on our side at the moment, but we're the fastest McLaren, which is all we can be at the moment. But it's living the dream. It's been a dream to be in British GT for a while now, and here we are. So no, it's going really well. Absolutely loving it. We've Paddock Motorsport for my second year, and I think we're set for a good year ahead, both on and off track.
Yeah, great stuff. And I'll be honest, I've had a little look at your socials before we came on here, and I saw a video of you practicing driver changes, which is obviously something that's a little bit different to what we're used to seeing in Formula 2. How difficult is that?
Yeah, it's not easy. It takes a bit of practice. We tend to practice it every weekend. In the longer endurance races, we'll have refueling and tyre changes as well. So whilst we're getting in and out of the car and running around the car, there's tyres and there's guys getting the tyres on and off, and same with the refueling guys. So there's a lot going on. It's another aspect, another kind of spanner in the works. But it's a new experience. We've taken to it quite well. It's enjoyable. It's really fun. It's cool to kind of to be working towards being the fastest guys in the pit stops. It's just a little advantage to have over everyone else.
Yeah, brilliant. And I'd absolutely love to see that in Formula 2, by the way. Driver switches between teammates at halfway through the race. What do you reckon, Jim? Welcome, by the way. Would you like to see that in Formula 2?
No, I wouldn't. Just to put it right out there. I remember was Formula E, which I'll take every opportunity, apparently, to hit on. I said hit, I will just emphasize. When they had the car switching, I know it's not exactly the same. In single seaters, it just seems so odd, Like I really appreciate the skill involved when you do it in tin top racing and getting the car out and getting different seats, all that sort of stuff. I really think it's a big talent. In single seaters, yeah, I'm happy for them just to remain single seaters. The car is the person's for the most part. So I appreciate you asking the question. For novelty, maybe I'd like to see it. I think W Series actually are doing some sort of race this year, like in the social thing about who could get in and out of the car quickest and all this sort of stuff. And it's like, there's such a palaver. It's not just a seatbelt off. It's getting all of the things out. It's getting off off your hands device. It's getting out of the halo and all this. It's not going to work, mate.
Yeah, it takes skill, doesn't it, to do. So fair play to you, Mo. Jim, it's been obviously a while since we've had you on, actually. So what have you made of the season so far?
You have been far too generous. The last time I was meant to be on, I think, was before the last race, or after the last race, and my internet completely decided not to play ball. So
I wasn't going to say anything,
generous to me. Just revealing behind the curtain a little bit there. But no, the season, it's been good, hasn't it? It really has been. I was looking at the top championship standings before we came on, because it's not as bad as last year, but it still feels like the last race was a while ago, with about a month since we were at Imola. And Pourchaire now leading the race, leading the championship, should I say, after winning the last race. And I really enjoyed it. Jeddah was Jeddah, which I don't know if it's got a place in Formula 2, in all honesty. But Bahrain, terrific. Imola was really, really good. Formula 3 was exceptional in Imola as well. If you didn't watch any of that, the last few laps were tremendous. But yeah, the big thing when I was looking at the results is that nobody's won a race twice apart from Mr. Pourchaire, which is why he's leading the championship. And I think that really speaks highly of how competitive the championship is. Another takeaway from me is the rookies are feeling a bit left behind. So I was looking through that again with the championship order. And it's all the returning drivers, including Ralph Boschung, I will highlight as well, that's making up those top positions. Not that I
8,
expected
yeah.
more from the rookies. Yeah, exactly. Not expected more from the rookies necessarily. And as I'm sure we'll speak about later, Dennis Hauger's been horribly unlucky, but there doesn't look to be a Piastri this year. I don't know if that's for the better or for the worse, but it's tight, but there's no rookie, I don't think, that's going to be in the championship hunt come the end of the season.
Yeah, I think you're probably right. Ayumi Iwasa, the highest rookie at the moment in 9th place. But I do think that any one of those top drivers will be thinking that they have a shot at the title, right, Lawrence? So welcome, by the way. And I suppose it's a nice opportunity to kind of reflect on the season off the back of that after 4 rounds. Is there which drivers, which teams have kind of impressed you the most so far this season?
I think my answer is pretty much going to mirror exactly what Jim said there. The driver that's probably impressed me the most would have to be Teo Pourchaire. If not for the mechanical issues that he's suffered, he would be in an even stronger position in the championship than he is now. Like Jim says, 2 out of 3 feature race wins, first in the championship. He really has delivered. Obviously, that last win in Imola, there was an element of fortune there, but he held it together where a few other drivers faltered on that day. It was quite a difficult weekend all round with the weather and the lack of practice they had. So to come out of that weekend with such a good result is really impressive. And another driver that I'd like to highlight is Ayumi Iwasa, as we just said, the highest rookie driver this season. I think it was in Bahrain. He went and overtook everybody. Obviously, helped a little bit by pit stops, but he overtook effectively the entire field during that race. And so many really highly respected drivers have struggled this season. Hauger, Vesti, even Doohan, who hasn't managed to score many points despite looking fast at times. He has done a really, really good job this season. And I'd also like to highlight Trident in terms of the teams that have done really well. Scored some really good points with Virtuosi, who was signed at the very last minute. What a season he's having, 5th in the championship. And his teammate, Kalen Williams, has started surprisingly well as well. I don't think many people quite expected how good he's been so far this season. So I think those drivers and teams have really stood out for me so far. But like Jim says, it is such a competitive season this year, and there are so many drivers up there that could get a result this weekend.
One of the things I'd like to point out as well is just how Prema been on the back foot, how much that seems to have opened the championship up. Like if you considered the championship last year, if you had this kind of idea that the Prema are going to be there but not winning a race, like it's crazy. If you think about how strong they've been historically, and I'm sure they're going to come good. And Hauger, as I pointed out earlier, horribly unlucky in Jeddah. So Prema not being there and Trident stepping up and Van Amersfoort coming up and actually being a solid outfit, the championship's in a really healthy state at the moment if you consider where it was before. And there was one other point I did want to make about how the championship's unfolded with Pourchaire. Because you talk about the misfortune, mechanical problems and stuff. And obviously Lawson had the problem as well with mechanical. Was it in Jeddah 2? I think it was in the feature race. Lawson's retired from 2 races and Pourchaire's retired from 2 races. But the difference between feature race and sprint race is huge. Like Pourchaire's retirement's come to sprint races and he's leading the championship. And if Drogovic doesn't continue his early season form, he's just going to run away with it potentially. Where meanwhile, Lawson, who for all intents and purposes, I thought could be in the championship hunt and much closer to Pourchaire. His retirement's coming in the feature race, and it is hurting him horribly.
Yeah, very early stages, of course, but yeah, you are right. Those 2 retirements for Liam Lawson have cost him big time. Okay, that's the season so far. Then Barcelona this weekend is a track that all of the drivers know so well. Everyone always highlights the fact that, everyone does know it so well, Mo, but does that also come with its disadvantages as well?
Yeah, I think it'll mean that all the drivers are fairly equal. There's no, you've not really got many excuses to pin on lack of experience around the track. I'm sure a lot of these guys, going up the single seater route will have been here on numerous occasions. But I think, it's notoriously not the easiest to overtake on. And I think that'll probably throw a curveball into things because, these cars, they rely on so much downforce and everything, like they're aero cars, so they've struggling to follow each other. I think it'd be quite interesting to see how important qualifying might play out to be on the weekend.
Yeah, absolutely. A really good point about the overtaken. And funny enough, we actually have a question about that from @Geordie_Bradshaw on Twitter. And it's actually a video question. Jordan, take it away.
Oh, inside F2. So obviously the Barcelona track is known for having a lack of overtaking opportunities. So my question to you guys is, if you could change one part of the track, what would it be and why?
Great question, Jordan. Mo, we'll come to you for that one.
Yeah, I think there's probably quite a few changes you can make. I think personally, I would say another big straight would probably help things quite a bit, because as you've got the main pit straight and you've got the straight out at the back. But I think other than that, really, you've got a lot of medium to high speed corners, which are very hard to follow someone closely through and to set up a move. So I think another straight in the first sector of the track would probably help things in terms of overtaking. And I think that would open the opportunity to get a good run through the first few corners and open things up. Because if you don't get it right through turn 1 and turn 2 and turn 3 even, you've got to wait a very long time until the next straight before you can really get a good shot at getting past someone. So I think that's what I would say. And equally with the last sector of the track, it's very low speed, and again it's quite hard to kind of to set up a move nicely into there. It's difficult, and then you're waiting a very long time until your next opportunity.
If we were to get rid of the final 2 chicane, or the chicane at the final 2 turns, would that increase an overtaking opportunity on the main straight, do you think?
I think so, yeah, because I guess you're coming onto the main straight at a much higher speed then, and you're keeping that gap to the cars in front. So I think it certainly wouldn't be a bad thing, because I believe the bikes, the MotoGP tended to use that route where they miss out the chicane, and I'm sure that'll provoke great opportunities for overtaking in any class of racing around the circuit.
I'd like to actually jump in on this as well, because what a terrific question. And I just looked at the configuration of the track, and people who have heard me on podcasts, this one and others before, I'm a massive fan of the Red Bull Ring, and it's because it's short. Not to say a track has to be short, but when there's been an overtaking opportunity, you only have to wait another, in Formula One world, like another minute before you get a chance to do it again, or less than that actually, because you've got the turn, well, really turn 2, and then the one that goes downhill. And I was just looking at the track there, and when you go from that second straight you're talking about to turn 10, and you've got the long, well, it's longer now, sweeping left-hander, turn 10 that is, that section, that final sector does nothing, personally. For testing, I'm sure it's excellent. Like, it's low speed, really good to see how your car is balanced. But in terms of racing, woeful. I don't remember seeing many overtakes there at all, because it's just single file. But you've got quite a bit of a downhill there, which goes into the final corner. And if you really want to have overtakes, if you were somehow able to cut that final Mickey Mouse section out a little bit and go straight from turn 10 downhill into make that the final corner. I don't know how pit entry works. That's just, we're talking fantasy here. I think you've got a really good track there, because you've got that DRS zone, which will be longer, overtakes possible there. And then you have that interesting dynamic of who's going to be the person to pick up DRS onto the next straight after a hairpin, where it's really easy to it's easier to overtake, where you're going to see some moves. I think right there you've got a terrific little track, and somehow everybody's going to be a little bit happier with Barcelona. But as the track is right now, yeah, it's that final sector makes it worse than it actually is.
Herman Tilke, step aside. Jim Kimberley is coming in to take your job, so sign him up. Jim, does there, I suppose conversely to that, does there need to be overtaking for a race to be a good race? With Imola perhaps being a prime example of that, where maybe there's not as much overtaking, but it does usually produce a good race.
It's an age-old question, isn't it? Does there need to be overtaking? No, there doesn't need to be overtaking. It's great to see overtaking, but we had a podcast before, I think it was last year, and I can't remember the guest who it was, but they had this point where they brought up saying it's the quality of overtaking, and that's really key actually, because they were saying how Formula One has fewer overtakes than Formula 2 and in particular Formula 3, but you forget so many in the junior formula, right? Because the quality is it's chaos. You've got the reverse grids, which makes it, you've got fast drivers behind you, and just with the equality or perceived equality of the cars, you do see more overtakes. But while I could remember, and I will remember distinctly, Max Verstappen's overtake on Leclerc, well, the overtakes at Jeddah, and then the overtake at Miami, I don't really remember all the details of every overtake we've had in Formula 2 because I forget there's so many that you have there. So to answer the question, no, you don't need it. But equally, there's a reason why we love Formula 2, right? Because you do have a lot of overtaking. And should we have a procession this time around? It wasn't a procession at Imola. That'd be unfair. But it certainly wasn't as wild as Formula 2 can be. But if we have a procession this time around, we've got Monaco next as well. And rather than is overtaking important, maybe not. But when you've got the championship with Imola, Barcelona, and Monaco back to back to back, overtaking starts to become a little bit more important. Fortunately, Baku comes after that, and we all know what that's like in Formula 2. So it's not, but 3 races where overtakes might be limited, maybe it's more important that we get a good race somewhere in between, else people might switch off.
Yeah, absolutely. We say all of that about Barcelona having or not being the best for overtaking, and we forget that last time we were there, Nobuharu Matsushita went from 18th to win the race and overtook 17 people. So maybe we're chatting a load of dribble, and people in the comments might let us know.
We always do.
We always do. Exactly that. Lawrence, Teo Pourchaire obviously won last time out. We've spoken about him, the new championship leader now. Do you think his mindset will change, the fact that he's now in the championship lead, or will he be approaching the weekend the same as he does every other weekend?
No, I don't expect it to change at all, really. I think all the drivers have been quite non-committal so far in speaking about the rest of their season, because it is a longer season this year and there is a whole group of drivers stacking up right behind him that, with the amount of points that are on offer on a weekend, are within distance. In a couple of weekends, if it doesn't go right for him, he can find himself well down the order. So I think he knows he just needs to keep the same approach that he's been doing. But also, I asked him actually in the last press conference after Imola how he approaches these races in terms of risk, because we saw so many drivers in that race make errors, and he the waves almost parted for him to come through and win that race. And he was saying that he does make an effort not to make silly moves, not to be over aggressive. And then it's not just him as well. The team also have emphasized the importance of consistency. He actually said that they're not bothered about getting the fastest pit stop. They just want to make absolutely sure that all of the wheels are on the wagon when it leaves the pits. So I think he's actually been approaching this entire season so far as if he's already the championship leader. He's already had that mindset at the start of the year, and I think he'll continue that right the way through. And maybe that is a big part of why he's in the position that he is. So let's see if that remains consistent. As we know, luck has played a big part in it. Lawson's DNFs in feature races versus Pourchaire's in sprint races has had a big difference, but the luck will even out over the course of a season. So I think you might see evidence of that approach really paying dividends as we move forward, and you get to tracks like Barcelona, Monaco, Baku, where if there's an overtake to be made, it's often with risk, with street circuits coming up. So I think he'll just continue on how he is, and it should yield results for him again.
Yeah, maybe a bit of a development piece from last season, from his rookie season. Speaking of rookies, Mo, obviously, as we've already mentioned, Barcelona, every driver seems to know it so well. Is this perhaps the first venue of the season where rookies almost don't have any excuses anymore? They have to be on the pace.
Yeah, I think from a driver's perspective, if I was, in their position, you're going into a weekend at a track where, a lot of the drivers will be very familiar, like we were saying before. It's, so yeah, that almost eliminates an excuse straight away. You almost expect to be hitting the ground running more than you would anywhere else in the season. And hopefully that translates into some good racing as well. Everyone's going to be, on the top form at a track they all know fairly well. So I think it'll bring positives to the weekend for sure. But, in a rookie's position, I'm sure they'll be feeling a bit of pressure. I'm sure they'll be expected to perform well at a circuit they know. So yeah, I think it'll throw, again, like a lot of things this weekend, it'll throw a curveball into it again. But it would be cool to see some of the rookies, fighting for the sharp end of the field. A circuit they all know fairly well. I'm sure the gaps at the top end are going to be pretty narrow in qualifying and even in the race.
And of course, those rookies have had testing there in Barcelona recently, and they've had all of these weeks just looking ahead towards Barcelona. So I guess they've got their time to review the last few races, realize where they need to make improvements, and be absolutely on top form for this race. So yeah, it'll be quite difficult to predict the sort of running order we're going to have this weekend.
You also got to remember, when you talk about the last time Formula 2 was there, and you talk about Sachitsa's win, we also had Drogovic as a rookie winning in the sprint race then as well. So it does show that the rookies can do very well there. So some good points that it does even the playing field somewhat. But at the same time as well, you can see the experienced drivers are used to racing there even more. They've got another few races under their belt. But everybody, like we suggested, has some experience there. Whether or not they've won, I don't know, but it could really even out the playing field. And as Mo said, qualifying is just going to be absolutely key.
It really is, isn't it? And let's hope for, as you say, a more even playing field, and we'll see how the rookies get on. How difficult, Mo, from your perspective, and I'm sure you've been in this situation. In fact, you're in this situation this season. How difficult is it for a driver to adapt to a new category? And is that, it does take time, doesn't it?
Yeah, I think it's different categories and different cars are always going to take different lengths of time to adjust to. I think the kind of the beauty of single-seater racing is generally your driving styles and your techniques are quite similar as you work up the ranks, all the way from F4, all the way up to the top, the pinnacle. I'm sure there's a lot of things that translate, year to year, which will, obviously help development, and that's why you see, so many drivers so quickly, work up through the ranks in single-seater racing, and it even starts down at karting. The basics that you learn there, I'm sure 90% of that translates directly to the guys, up in F1. In my position, I found that, in GT racing, every car's got its own quirks and its own almost like personality in a sense. But I'm sure, for some of the rookies, in F2 this year, I'm sure they've, there's a lot of things they can take from their previous seasons, and keep the momentum up, into this season. But without a doubt, I'm sure there's going to be drivers, even the non-rookies, the guys who've been in it for a while. Every weekend is going to be, a learning weekend. And for some of these guys who may not be as experienced with this circuit as well, that's also going to throw a curveball at things. But yeah, it's certainly not easy jumping in, to a faster, more demanding car. It's always going to throw, a new challenge at all the drivers, I'm sure.
Yeah, really interesting. Really, really interesting. It's someone who has taken a little bit of time to perhaps settle is Dennis Hauger. We've already touched on that, Jim. Presumably he'll be looking to build on that podium last time out in the sprint race at Imola.
Yeah, he's not having the best of luck, is he? I looked at how Hauger's done, and I think it's one of those weird bits where his poor start to the season, because he wasn't great in Bahrain, I think he'd admit that as well, has almost made you think he's doing worse than he is, because he's been ridiculously unlucky. So podium, yeah, and it's deserved as well, because let's face it, that was a farce in Jeddah with the call with the pit lane being closed, but the team saying no, and then, oh, look, we looked at the timing screens and it doesn't have seconds on, so which message precedes which. So Hauger was doing nothing wrong, in my opinion, to essentially lose a race. And that could have just turned his whole season around. I don't think Hauger's going to run away or even be in the championship fight when we start getting towards the end of the season. However, I don't think he's doing anywhere as bad as his current position, which I don't even know where that is in the championship, 12th. Oh, I don't think he's doing as badly as that. And when you consider again him doing pretty damn well last time out in the feature race, when we've already spoken about how well feature race or how important feature races are, and he has a collision with Doohan like off the line in just one of those freak accidents. Those two things alone could have netted him. I don't know where he'd have finished in the race, but let's be fairly generous and say he gets P3, P4. all of a sudden the guy's looking like he's got 25 odd more points, which catapults him up the championship standings, and he'd be sitting in third. So, as he had a bad start, yeah, but is it from his poor performances? Bahrain, yeah. Afterwards, probably not so much. And when you see somebody as experienced as Daruvula in the sister car, also not going around dominating, winning races, he's done great because he's had 3 podiums so far, but no wins. I think it does make you remember that the start of the season can be pivotal for how people view you. And I think people wrote off Schwartzman unfairly quite early last year because of his really poor start to the season. But come the end of the championship, well, no one was ever going to catch Piastri, were they? But he did pretty well. So I wonder if Hauger's suffering a little bit in the same regard. He won in Formula 3 in the feature race in Spain, so absolutely.
There you go. There you go. Absolutely. Let's wait and see. Another team under a little bit of pressure are last season's runners-up, which Virtuosi, I mean, that seems a lifetime ago, doesn't it, that they were second in the standings. Bottom of the standings this season, 7 points from 4 rounds. 2 of those points have come from Jack Doohan's pole position in the opening round, which again seems like a bit of a lifetime ago, doesn't it? Will they be worried, Lawrence?
Yeah, that's almost painful to even listen to. When you read it out like that, it's been quite a dramatic fall from grace for them. They took Guan Yu Zhou to third in the championship last year. He looked pretty much nailed on to get second through most of the season, and even at times looked like he might win the championship. And then he's, of course, they took him on to Formula One. Obviously, second in the team standings to bottom. That is frustrating for them because they've had opportunities to score good points, but they haven't capitalised on them. There was a slightly clumsy incident with Doohan at the pit exit in Bahrain, and of course that start crash in Imola, which was so unfortunate. Like Jim says, it's just a bit of a freak accident, both moving for the same gap at exactly the same time. But saying all of that, they clearly have pace in the car. They started the season by taking pole position, so they know that they can get up the order if they get everything together. And that's what I'm really looking forward to in this next phase of the season, as Jim's just talked about in terms of Dennis Hauger as well. Once these drivers that have had some misfortune start to rack up the points, you'll start to get more of a representative championship battle. And we talk about how competitive it's been, and we haven't even factored in, if you look at your Vips, Lawson, Pourchaire, Drogovic, those sorts of drivers competing for the title. If you throw in names like Doohan and Hauger, once they start getting better results, it's going to be an even more fantastic championship battle this season. So I think Virtuosi will be looking long term. But they ultimately do need results. Nothing's guaranteed in Formula 2. It is very competitive. So, you're only as good as your last race. So they need to make sure they make some improvements. But I think they will do.
I feel like it's harsh to say, but you almost get what you deserve in some regards when you get the rookie in, and as good as a rookie is, we saw that last year in Jack Doohan, still a rookie, and we've already spoken, the top 8 drivers aren't rookies, right? There's an issue, which we speak about money on the podcast quite a lot, and the other seat is not occupied by somebody who I think is the experienced driver you want to have next to a rookie. The guy hasn't qualified in top 10 so far this championship. He's scored 1 point, 1 race, I think it was, when he scored a point. And if Virtuosi have had a good run of form recently, it's because of the quality of the drivers they had in both of their seats. And you see it with, and these views are my own, if you see it with Williams in Formula 1, like Albon's grabbing points. So he's had point scores in the last 2 of the last 3 races where Latifi's struggling like hell with that car. And there's a quality difference. And I think you're seeing it in Virtuosi at the moment. And should you have had, well, Drogovic didn't do the best in Virtuosi last year, but see if you had Drogovic and Doohan, I don't think they'd be at the bottom of the championship at the moment. So they've kind of made their bed, as horrible as it is to say, but you kind of have to look at it that way, that they're not going to be a team's championship contender this year. Absolutely not. Maybe it's a long-term plan where they grab some money this year, which is the presumption I think is happening, and then they go for it next year with whichever drivers they have. But this year, it's a write-off for them, I'm afraid.
And that is something that teams are going to have to consider moving forward as well, that in this championship, you get thrown into the first race, you get a tiny practice session, you have qualifying. If you don't have a good qualifying, you don't have a good weekend because you're very unlikely to get a good result in the feature race. So if you turn up at the first race and you've got one driver who just generally doesn't seem to be competitive and another that's still learning, you get 3 rounds in and we're talking about Virtuosi and already writing them off. And it's almost too late now, is how it seems almost, for them to get their season back on track. So I think maybe last season, the fact that Piastri did that well maybe made people forget how difficult it can be for rookies to adjust to the sport. I think teams looking forward now will realise, okay, if we're going to bring up a talented rookie through the ranks, we've got to make sure they're partnered with that strong, experienced driver that can deliver from day one before it's too late.
I think he's got the likes of Dams. That's this perfect example, I would say. If you're going to have like a driver who is better than Sato, like Nissani's experienced, not the best driver there, but if you're going to have somebody as a rookie coming in, you want somebody of like a minimum of a Nissani level who isn't, I was going to say, isn't bidding at every race, but when we talk about the last race, but he wasn't bidding it generally, who's steady enough, but he's quick. Like Nissani, he's not going to do a championship challenge, but he scores points frequently enough that I think Iwasa's going to have something to learn from him, where it's just not the case in Virtuosi. I feel like I could be even harsher than I'm being, but there's a driver. We don't have a driver as bad as we had last year, but we've still got pretty bad drivers in the championship.
Yeah, obviously does have some talent there, and as you say, a benchmark for Iwasa as well. And actually, Jim, you've tied me in quite nicely because I was looking for someone to set me up about Nick De Vries getting the FP1 drive for Williams this weekend. So yeah, obviously former Formula 2 champion. So yeah, massive well done and best of luck to him. Speaking of the teams and the teams championship, we actually have another question, and it's another video question as well. This time from at Sean X Williams 97 on Twitter. Sean, over to you.
Hey, Inside F2, I have a question for everyone. If you could race in Formula 2 with any team of your choice, who would you choose and why?
Thank you, Sean. Another great question. Lawrence, we'll come to you first for that one.
Ha!
Oof. Lucky me. Lucky me. That is such a difficult question. I think I'd probably lean towards Carlin. I think the experience they've got and sort of how friendly the team seems to be. I mean, Lawson's gone there and has performed quite well so far. He seems to be pretty happy there. So I'll probably take Carlin.
Mo, can you answer this one?
I can. I've never actually met any of the guys at any of these teams, so I have a neutral perspective. I think it would be between High-Tech or Prema because with Prema they've stepped into the sports car world as well, so I quite like the way they're spread across. They kind of they've spread their skills, and it shows that they're a rounded team. And then High-Tech, they're actually a team that before I got into racing, at the level I'm at now, they were a team that I followed quite closely because one of my friends ended up racing for them in F3 in the UK, or GB3 it's called. So I think they would be between those two if I had to choose any.
Cool. And Jim?
Is Ollie Caldwell going to be in Campos if I'm joining Campos, or am I going to be replacing Ralph Boschunker? So that's quite an easy answer. In all seriousness, should I be able to pick out which of the two cars isn't the cursed car, despite Frederick Vesti telling me explicitly that there's not a cursed car in ART, I think ART would be a good shout. They've got such good... I mean, Prema seems like the obvious answer, right? Because you're thinking, if you're going to go for a potential championship with the team, it's going to be Prema. But I think ART, you forget how good they are because they generally have one of the cars cursed. So should I have the ability to go to the cars, feel the bad juju, and go for the one that's not so bad, I'd probably go ART, actually.
And wish that you don't get the cursed ART seat, right?
That's exactly it, yeah. Bad juju one, I'm going to be like, no, that one could be Pourchaire's. I'm going to have this one over here.
There you go. Love that. And brilliant. Yeah, obviously love the video questions as well, guys. So keep them coming in at F2 Inside on Twitter, at _Inside Formula 2 on Instagram, or just DM us or DM me. Send them our way, send them my way, and we'll put them into the show. Love them, really. Love them. Okay, let's take a look at the championship standings before we leave then. As we said, Théo Pourchaire tops the leaderboard by just 2 points after his feature race victory in Imola. He'll be looking to defend that lead this weekend. There's nothing to separate the chasing pack, with Jehan Daruvala and Liam Lawson separated by just 1 point in 3rd and 4th. Richard Verschoor and Ralph Boschung will be happy with their season so far. They round out the top 6. And the team standings: MP Motorsport lead the way going into this weekend. ART, High-Tech, Carlin and Prema all separated by just 10 points. 12 points, by the way, separating Prema from MP at the top. All of those teams will fancy their chances of a strong weekend this weekend. And Trident round out the top 6. And the full standings are available on our website, www.insidef2.com. Okay, that's all we have time for today. My thanks to Mo, to Jim and to Lawrence for joining me on today's show. And thank you to you guys at home for watching as well. If you've enjoyed the show, make sure you give us a like, subscribe for more Formula 2 content, hashtag the F2 show to get involved in the conversation. But from me, Fraser Ford, and all of us here at Inside F2, we'll see you next time.